Hello and welcome to a brand new season of Rugby League Backchat. We're holding court at the Arc in Headingley, and over the next 60 minutes a real royal rumpus of Rugby League rabble-rousing. Sat round the round table today is the publisher of League Weekly, our press baron Danny Lockwood, the managing editor of 4020 magazine, the Prince Regent of Reason Phil Caplan, and a legend on the pitch and peerless with his predictions off it as well, I've been told to say, Garry Schofield. Gentlemen, the reason for all the royal references in the introduction: Wigan are the kings of the Rugby League castle. Danny, with their win in the World Club Challenge, are they the best team in the world?
That's what it says on the tin, and that's good enough for me, and I think that's good enough for all of us in Super League. It's great to have something finally to celebrate after a couple of barren years. Yes, get that one in. And I think that the main thing is this wasn't a fluke. These were two terrific performances by Wigan and Warrington. They brought their A game in a way that we probably haven't seen from the British contenders in the World Club Series the last couple of years. And I think that they were deserved champions, and I think that they can wear their crown fairly and squarely, Richard.
It's not a panacea for some underlying issues in the game, in the same way that losing in 2016 didn't mean the death of Super League, but we should absolutely revel in this. I think it's been an immense shot in the arm in what's a really big year for the sport, ending up with the World Cup. The way that they played leaves no one in any doubt that they were worthy winners in two different styles of game, and I think that was quite important as well. We showed we could play the open and expansive stuff through Warrington. We showed we could tough it out with them with Wigan, and I think the most important comment probably of anybody who you know, as the teams flew out, came from Shane Flanagan of Cronulla, who said I'd come back every year. Well, this time last year we were scrabbling around trying to find any Aussie team that would come over here. The message will go back. This is a worthwhile event. This is a promotable event. This is something that we can use to expand the frontiers of the game, both here and over there. But the most important thing is that International Club Rugby League is back on the map thanks to Warrington and Wigan.
I think as well what it brought to our game and all is that word respect, because I think after the last 2 years, as Danny has mentioned, you know, and Phil said there, clubs didn't want to come over because they didn't respect our competition. They didn't really think that we was good enough to be playing these games. But the good thing about it, Cronulla brought the best team. So did Brisbane, so that's the respect they gave us. Wayne Bennett wants to play in this competition, so does Shane Flanagan. But I tell you what, take nothing away from Warrington, take nothing away from Wigan. They were outstanding, and that's what we've got now. We've got respect from the Aussies, and hopefully they go back home now and say, hey, listen, they are the kings. They are the kings of the world. Now we've got to try and get that medal back.
They don't like it up them. And they didn't like, the players didn't like it. And I know we had a few handbags being waved.
Which
and
shows
a bit
it
of
meant something.
You know, the pulling Talia Matautai's hair. And I just loved it because they really lost their rag. And that's, for an Englishman, to see that from an Aussie is just a delight. So I do think we got a little bit fortunate, because I think because of the nature of the concept, the teams that are playing in February are not always the strongest teams that finished the previous September,
Although
October.
That said, North Queensland bought 1-17 last year.
Yeah,
so
yeah. I meant for us more than for them, Phil.
Well,
but I thought what you saw out of Wigan and Warrington were two teams that really looked to have improved, if anything, on last year.
And full of English players.
Yeah.
And the other thing,
who were the stars of the show?
And of course, the other thing is we talked long and hard about the dearth of halfbacks. The two men of the matches, both number sixes, both English, both at different ends of the age scale. Probably rarely been a better debut than Kevin Brown's for Warrington, but George Williams and the progression he's made, and now being able to hold his own defensively as much as on attack in that arena, just augurs well for the choices that Wayne Bennett's going to have.
What do you make of the Alves, Garry?
Oh, well, sensational. I was absolutely delighted, and you know what? It was an absolute pleasure watching Kevin Brown and Declan Patton on Saturday. Okay, it's happened since 1895, since the game started. The forwards will lay the foundations for it. They'll do the hard work. But the great thing about it was the way that Kevin Brown was plotting his way around the field, the way that Declan Patton said to Kevin Brown, have 5 or 10 minutes now, let me take charge, I'll vary the game plan. And then when Kevin Brown came in, and as I say about all halfbacks here now, you don't need to be involved for the full 80 minutes. If you're involved, let's say, 8 times in a game, you come up with 5 or 6 champion players, which is exactly what Kevin Brown did. It was sensational. And then also as well, the day after, and let's not forget here with George Williams, Sean Wayne got heavily criticised for saying, what are you playing him for? He's not ready for it. Do you know what? The delight for me and what Sean Wayne has done with this young kid is say, hey, listen, He's going to make mistakes, this kid, but one thing for sure, I believe in him, and I'm sticking by him week in and week out. And what I predicted about George Williams for mine, certainly if he keeps injury, okay, his form, which I'm sure he will do now because he's a quality player, is that he will be our number 6 for England for the next 10 years, let's say. But the great factor for mine this weekend, and I hope, Danny and Phil, that Wayne Bennett, we all know what a Super League coach what he is, or a super coach I should say, this guru of a coach. Hopefully he's got the nous now to see that the halfbacks what we've got in Luke Gale, Jock Williams, Declan Patton and also to Kevin Brown, get on the phone to them 4 players and tell them if you're fit, you're going to the World Cup. Because what I will say here now, which is quite surprising a little bit, because after the 4 Nations, which was quite pathetic really, wasn't we? We were quite pathetic. But if anything happens to Australians, Jonathan Thurston or Cooper Cronk, tell you what, we could win the World Cup with our halfbacks.
Well, the likelihood is they'd bring in Ben Hunt and James Maloney, who have just been played off the park by the Air English halfback.
I'm not a fan of Ben Hunt anyway, and I do think we've got a little note of caution here. It's the first couple of weeks of the season, and as encouraging as George Williams was this weekend, I thought he was a bit hit and miss. I'd love to see how he and Thomas Luluai developed their relationship, because I thought Luluai was terrific. Quietly, and he really shored up their defence, did Luluai, as indeed did Williams on his side of the field. But, you know, a lot of, if we're looking at the England halfbacks 6-7 months down the line, Gary, it will depend how Gareth would reinvents himself, if indeed he can this year down there.
It's too slow for me, Dan. It's
too
slow.
Well, I agree with that, but let's just see how these guys take the game on.
But isn't it great that we've got competition for places all of a sudden in these
Isn't it nice to be even arguing about having something to
argue about? And that's before
you
you throw in somebody like Blake Austin, who might be available.
Are you in danger of committing too early by saying that?
No.
You know, so you're saying, Gary, if Mark Sneed, I'm just picking a name, for example, has a fantastic season, don't bother. Mark.
Listen, don't throw Mark Sneed at me, because he can't create anything with ball in hand. We all know he's got a great kicking game, exactly like Danny Brook, but we know Danny Brook will be going somewhere else. But Mark Sneed, he doesn't create anything with ball in hand. I'm not being
any English half. If any English half in Super League has a great season, you'll say tough luck.
Well, neighbour, who's getting better? Who's going to be better than Luke Gale? Gareth O'Brien's a fullback.
Would George Williams have been in your thinking at the start of last season? No. But was he in your thinking at the end? Yes.
Yeah, well,
so that's my point.
No, to be honest with you, with what I've seen with these 4 halfbacks and what I've seen with the rest of them, it's quite simply not good enough for international rugby league. It's as simple as that.
You would have had Jordan Lilly in the England squad last year, and he's on loan at Bradford.
Well, I'll tell you what as well, 2 years ago, and I've had Liam Sutcliffe in there, but let me say this, the way they are being coached, them 2 players, they are not being allowed to play with that vision and awareness. They are not being allowed to express himself like George Williams is at Wigan at times, and so too in Kevin Brown and also to Declan Patton. So the scenario with them 2 players is quite simple. They are not being allowed to express themselves. And what I would like to say, I'd like to say to all coaches out there, when you see halfbacks perform like they did in Williams and Brown and Declan Patton, like Luke Gale does at Castleford, they have coaches who are allowed to play what you see and express yourself. So all you coaches out there now, all the halfbacks at these clubs, go to your coach and say, listen, I can play like that, and allow me to do that, and we'll see better players.
But it's not just halfbacks. We can talk about Oliver Gildart putting his name in the frame as the centre. Joe Burgess, again, has reinvented himself, having gone out to say, looks a different player. Joe Westerman, obviously playing...
I thought that was the best I've seen Joe Westerman play since his Castleford days.
And he's playing in front of the England coach, so that
he
added
starts
even
in the
more
World
value.
Cup then, Westerman. He's on Gary's logic. Because he was brilliant this weekend.
Absolutely.
The big problem with Joe Westerman, as we all know, is his consistency. But I tell you what, if Joe Westerman could play like that, you would say 80-85% of the season, surely he will be on the play to us. It's all about consistency with Westerman.
And I know you mentioned George Williams getting the man of the match for Wigan, which he did, but the man of the match for me for Wigan head and shoulders was John Bateman, because that guy, I just love watching him.
Pain.
He's, he would not make it in the NRL because he just does not fit, their shape, he just doesn't have the physique, he's not the style for what the NRL wants. But you know what? They were sick and tired of the sight of him at the end of that game.
The other thing that I thought was really encouraging was Morgan Escaray, because he was taken on a bit as a project by Sean Wayne. He loves his projects. He looks slightly different. He's a bit more physical presence about him. But the tackle that he made to stop Tagatese, he then goes up the other end and creates the try for Burgess. I thought he fitted in seamlessly. And you would have thought that it would have taken a lot longer. So that's credit to Wigan. And the other thing about Warrington as well is that look at the 3 players that weren't playing that will walk straight back into their team. Chris Hill, undoubtedly, one of the best go-forward players. Ben Curry, who I think we'll all say again if he gets his
he's down the line
back.
in July anyway, but I'll tell you what, it's not guaranteed Ratchford the way Gidley played at full-back.
Stephen Ratchford. But again, isn't it great to have players of that ability that weren't playing? And you talk about mixing up the tactics. The great thing about the way Warrington approached it was they were encouraging charge downs. They were trying to disrupt what we see as the NRL pattern of play.
They spread the ball in their own 20. They were confident to throw it about. You know, they really gave.
They're playing the game the right way. That's what we want.
We need to move on. We'll talk more about Warrington and Wigan in the second part. It makes you wonder, by the way, if the Warrington coach should be any good at international level. Let's talk about that, because this was England versus Australia. We're in a World Cup year. Scoey's picked the team already. Yeah. Is it going to be England, Australia, England, New Zealand, those 3 at the end? I mean, what are we looking forward to come October, November time down under?
I think the great thing from this part of the world is we've got Scotland, who were fantastic in the 4 Nations, genuinely deserve to be the 4th ranked nation as we sit at the moment. We've got Wales, who are improving under John Keir, and they're going to Papua New Guinea. They'll absolutely love that. We've got an Ireland team that last time they went down under in the World Cup got to the quarterfinals and all had common tattoos. The French, I think, are improving. Yet to see, obviously, how they mix up the players. You wouldn't want too many of the Catalan guys going exclusively because they'll have had such a long, hard season anyway. But I think there's a lot of them for the Northern Hemisphere to be actually really genuinely looking forward to. You wouldn't look past an Australia-New Zealand final. Why would you? But there's certainly a 3rd place and a 4th place up for grabs. And I wouldn't be surprised if another home nation could get to the semi-final.
We're looking at England and New Zealand in the semi-final, and can we play the 80 minutes and get over them this year? You know.
All being
Deja vu yet again. Are we excited for it? Not yet. I'm excited for what we've got right in front of us, having seen what we saw last weekend. Yeah. In terms of the international stuff, I think it comes down to Wayne Bennett. He came over here last week, you know, he putting his hand up to some of the mistakes that have been made in the off-season in terms of PR. It was as close as you'll ever get to a charm offensive from the England coach. I think he's got a lot to prove. I think what we see when we play Samoa will be important.
That's a good test.
He's limited himself in terms of... You would have picked half a dozen Warrington players for that test.
That's the only thing I don't understand. If it's a genuine test...
And we're only going to take 3 from each club.
No, take your best team, because this is your one warm-up game.
I agree with you.
I agree, Chuck, but also as well, I'll tell you what, fellas, it's quite simple here. After the 4 Nations that's just gone, I was thinking, not a chance. No way, mate. We're not even going to get to the final, never mind win the thing. But I tell you what, after this weekend's fixtures, the way the half-backs have been allowed to play, Wayne Bennett, the England coach, has seen how our game should be played, asking many questions of the Australian defence, ripping into the Australians defensively. Defensively, we won't have an issue. Forward pack, we won't have an issue. We've got outside backs who have got pace. But if we allow our half-backs to play how they want to play, without vision and awareness, play what you see, I'll tell you what, I wouldn't have been saying this after the 4 Nations, but I'll tell you what I'm saying now, fellas. If our half-backs are selected properly, allowed to play how they want to play, I'll tell you what, don't rule out England. Don't rule out England.
Yeah, well, Wayne Bennett,
I think he may have peaked too early.
Wayne Bennett,
I don't think so. I don't think so. Honestly, this is how optimistic I am.
I think it's a Wayne Bennett quote, but it said if you keep repeating the things that you've always done, don't be surprised when you don't get a different outcome. Yeah. And so we always finish 3rd in this scenario. I think you're absolutely right there, Gary. We have to find a way of beating them with our game, and not with theirs. Because it didn't work last year.
But I also think the key behind that is what Wayne Bennett did with New Zealand. And I think that, again, his approach was, I'm going to let you play, I'm going to wander around, perhaps give you some tips. Stephen Kearn is your man, but I'll just make you feel that you're 10 feet tall before you go out. And maybe that's all we're missing.
Maybe it is.
But also as well, and a little bit disappointed, just by one quote what Wayne Bennett has said, you know, exactly what I'm going to say here now, Phil Caplan, he's not ruled out heritage players. I'm telling you, Wayne Bennett, don't be picking any Aussies. We don't want them in that dressing room.
If they're available, consider them.
Don't want them.
He's an Aussie.
We want the best 17.
We know why he's here, because he's made himself available, and Nigel said, right, Wayne Bennett's available, then we're making him an England coach. We've had an Aussie before, and it hasn't worked, has it?
You've already picked the halfbacks, but I have to say, from what I saw of the NRL last year, if he is available, Blake Austin would be a fabulous addition to the England squad. It would extra competition for places, extra variety. Yep. He's a talented player. He's never played for Australia. If he's eligible, why wouldn't you pick him? especially if it means you're going to win the World Cup.
Yeah.
If we win the World Cup,
The best, we want to give ourselves the best chance.
Absolutely.
You know, the New Zealand have never worried
their
about
place. If you'd have said this last year, you'd have said they'd have walked in. Now they might not.
No, but listen. What we have seen this weekend, I think you're missing the point here. What we have seen this weekend, right? When these players are allowed to play, when we're allowed to play off the cuff rugby league, play what you see. I tell you what, we can play. You know, we can play. So let them do it.
But at the end of the year, they'll have played 35 matches.
Oh,
we don't know what condition
the World
they're going
Cup's
to be.
coming up. That's not to do with it. They
Phil,
won't be tired.
What's the difference between? I know you often defend players playing for Scotland and Wales and the like. When you're saying that they should be playing for that country, are you not sort of contradicting yourself a little bit when you're saying bring in players and New Zealand do it so well? They pillage Samoa, Tonga, Fiji on a regular basis. Australia are not beyond pillaging New Zealand.
Or Fiji.
So, yeah, exactly. So, I mean, do we not need to be a bit more like Garry says and look very much on our own doorstep first?
I think when you look at somebody like Lachlan Coote, who was available for Scotland in the Four Nations, absolutely outstanding. And what he brings to the dressing room makes players like Matty Russell better. I also think that, you know, Luke Douglas was fantastic at prop. Yeah. Now, I think it's how you do it. You don't want to lose your identity. But this is, you know, we talked about Ben Teo winning an
England cap.
An England cap at Rugby Union and actually winning a game. And nobody, I don't think, from the Rugby Union fraternity was turning around saying, oh, that's a disgrace.
I know it's not our concern, but half that England Rugby Union team is foreign born.
Yeah, and
the bottom line is this: we don't make the qualification rules as much as Garry would love us to. You know, you would still have Yorkshire cricket not picking anyone born outside the Broad Acres. But the fact is, we play by the same rules as anyone else, and that means if the qualification criteria are what they are, we've got to get the best out of it.
We have two other responsible things. One is that our qualification rules are now 5 years. The other is we have a domestic quota, so there will be a protection for those.
You'll all be telling us Denny Solomona's link with playing for the Lions next. That's all we've got time for in the first part of today's programme. We're going to continue the international flavour in part 3 as we look at the Toronto Wolfpack and the NRL in detail. But next, it's firmly the Super League and the Championship. Welcome back to the Arc for part 2 of the first Rugby League back chat of 2017. Let's turn our attention firmly to domestic matters and starting in Super League. Garry, there's so much to go at here. We've only seen 1 or 2 games depending on which team you follow, but recruitment, rule changes, the hype over certain sides. What's at the forefront of your mind a couple of weeks in?
Well, everybody's still guessing who's going to finish in the top 8 and who's going to finish the bottom 4. And so the first couple of weeks there, you'd say, maybe Leigh going to struggle. Castleford with their great start, you know, they're going to finish in the top 4 or maybe finish the top of the league, as some people are predicting the way they're playing there. So, but I think week in and week out, I think what we're looking for, because I don't think we got it last year at times, is the quality, you know, the consistency and the quality. So for the first 2 weeks, question marks regarding Leigh. Are they going to be in that £1 million game? But also as well, can Castleford maintain the quality of what they've got? Big test for them this weekend at Friday night at Warrington from there. But Cass for mine, yeah, everybody's talking about them finishing in the top 4.
Danny?
Yeah, I'm with Garry there. I think I tipped Castleford to finish top 3 and possibly even get to Old Trafford, but that might be a little bit of wishful thinking. But I think the start that we saw from Castleford was just absolutely wonderful. I think that, you know, they're a lot of people's favourite second team. I think they will be there and thereabouts. As ever, the theme that we're going to be talking about come midsummer is injuries and which squad stands up the best. Leeds have sorted out their defence, so I think that, you know, their challenge now is to find ways to score enough points. I'm not convinced that they're a top 4 contender this year, got to say. I actually think that, and I know we've finished with the World Club Series, that we saw the grand final teams quite possibly, but again, you know, there's a lot to play for. St Helens, you know, I think they've got a lot of improvement in them, but they're going to be there and thereabouts. And I think that we will be looking at a lot of the same old strugglers. Leigh they've got a long way to come yet. but Widnes, Huddersfield, you know, a great win for Salford this past weekend. So I don't think we're going to see a radical change on last year.
My worry is that it's such a long season that we've introduced the concept of 2 Easters because we were supposed to have a camp that we didn't. That's going to harm our preparation for the World Cup, I think. That's not going to get us the consistency of excellence that you were talking about. The exciting thing, I think, having only seen 8 games so far this season, is there could be a shake-up at the top. Nobody's talked about Hull yet, but having won silverware last year, I think, again, Albert Kelly could be an important addition. They need creativity. He could bring it, but the pack is as good as anything in Super League.
It was a lousy day at Wakefield, but they didn't.
They were so rock solid that day. So I think, again, the touching silverware makes you want to do it more, so I wouldn't rule them out. The way that Castleford and Warrington play, I think, is something that we need to encourage, that we didn't see enough of that last year. I hope that, as you say, injuries don't determine who ultimately win the silverware. But I also think as well there is a worry about the quality of player coming into the competition. We haven't seen a major signing this year. Now that might even it out a little bit, but when you're talking about Zach Hardacre arguably could be the biggest signing and he's on loan, it's been a half-back reshuffle that, you know, Matty Smith's gone to St Helens, unfortunately been injured. That means that, you know, Luke Walsh has gone to Catalan, and then, you know, we haven't seen an influx of star names, and that would be my worry at the moment.
I think one star name we can mention, they had a great win against Warrington. That was Catalans. You know, I think I tipped before the season started. You know, I'm the perfect tips, as everybody knows. My predictions aren't far off every week, as everybody I keep getting reminded by everybody. But you know, Greg Bird at Catalans, he was outstanding, wasn't he? And I say the hooker Paul Ayton, you know, the experience the players got there. So what I'm hoping. For the French coach, Fresinu, is quite simple here. He's got the right dressing room now. He's got the players who want to perform for them week in and week out. Give the coach the respect what they deserve. And I say with Greg Bird, that with the leadership what he brought, then hopefully Catalans, it could turn around for them this year.
We say that every year, pretty much about them, without seeing, you know, that real. They looked the real deal for about 2 months last season, and then they disappeared again. And to be quite honest, I'm not sure how Laurent Fresinu. You know, I don't know what photographs he's got as a chairman, but he just seems bulletproof, and at times he just can't put a team on the field. I think that the Warrington defeat down in Catalans, there was a little bit of Warrington having one eye on the big match. I think we can't, you know, rule that out. But again, it'll be how well Catalan travel ultimately, and I think that we're going to be looking probably what we're going to be talking about as much as the teams later in the season. Is the structure for next year, because I think that those are the rumblings I'm getting, is that Roger Draper, the new basically chief executive of Super League, is going to be looking at a shake-up of how we end the season, and I'm not sure.
We haven't had one for such a long time, Danny, so
it's been 2.5 years.
Yeah. We've not talked about, because I want to tick everybody's box, otherwise people will be cross with us, Widnes, Huddersfield and Wakefield. I think then we've at least mentioned in passing all the Super League sides. Can you make a case, good or bad, for any of those three?
Certainly Wakefield, yeah. I think that the signing's what they've got, and there's a happy dressing room, and they're only playing for Chester there. So if they can, again, it's a word I'll be using a lot this season, it's consistency. So if they get that consistency, Wakefield, and the most importantly, the fans are expecting them not just to try and struggle to get into the top 8, but to make that top 8. So I don't see an issue with Wakefield, but certainly for Huddersfield, everybody would expect them to beat Salford the other week, but again, down to the old stories, and boy oh boy, the sort of defence.
The trouble with Huddersfield was they recruited so late. I mean, they had a thin squad last year. They had a captaincy issue last year that I think affected them off the field, but you needed to get your squad together and working in pre-season a lot earlier than they did, and they put a lot of emphasis on Jake Mamo, who's come over injured. We haven't even seen him yet.
Who?
Exactly.
Yeah. Who?
They've recruited 5 players from Bradford, and it's great that they'll get their chance to play at the top level, but again, you're recruiting from a team that didn't even make the top 4 in the Championship. There's going to be a settling in period. The worry for Widnes is just the loss of Kevin Brown. Where are they going to get, and Joe Mello being injured, you know, where are they going to get the points from?
Dennis Betts admirably has run that club basically on a shoestring since they came up from
and they've
the
got better every year,
and it has all been organic and incremental, but that will take you only so far. And I'm afraid if I was a Widnes fan, I'd be thinking, I can't even see this getting me into the 8, and if it does, that will be the achievement for the season. And and I don't think that that's good enough for a club of Widnes's heritage and stature.
I mean, we talked that there haven't been too many major signings, but it could be a really significant one at Wakefield in Sam Williams. So they were relatively fortunate that they managed Liam Finn and Jacob Miller so well that they played virtually every game, but now they've got options in the half-back. And Sam Williams has started the season really well, but they've got depth in all positions. So Wakefield, I think, will build on finishing in the top 8 last year. I have reservations for Lee only in the fact that I think that injuries early in the season are going to hurt a team, and they've already picked up at least 3 after 2 weeks.
Just touching on Widnes as well, and it is frustrating, I guess, for Dennis Betts, but also as well for the supporters, because I think it's the first time, and the Widnes fans have been pretty patient, since they've been back in Super League. But after that defeat by Huddersfield, I think it's the first time it's been heard that the Widnes fans were booing at half time and booing at full time as well. So it's going to be a long, hard season for Widnes.
Let's look at the Championship, if we may. Hull Kingston Rovers, 3 from 3, again, very, very early stages. Other sides that have impressed in patches include Rochdale, who the Robins beat at the weekend. Featherstone seem to be going pretty good. What have you made of the start of the season?
Even Swinton. I think it's one of those competitions where it literally is week by week. My tipping this weekend, unlike the King, was absolutely abysmal.
Don't worry, his wasn't.
I did not see Halifax really shoveling it to a Sheffield side that had thumped Toulouse, and a Toulouse side that had thumped Batley. I've been really encouraged by what Rochdale and Swinton have brought to the show. Really disappointed as a Dewsbury man that the Rams just look to be going nowhere fast. I think they're already fighting for survival. But at the top end, I think you can say Hull Kingston Rovers, obviously, although they haven't been absolutely convincing. Hull KR for sure, and then you've got a battle of probably 5 clubs going for the next.
I've been impressed with London, with the recruitment that they've done. Again, building on being in the top 4 last year. I think they look a really solid team. They're going to be hard to beat. But Toulouse have been a breath of fresh air. The way that they've played, it was double header their game against Sheffield after the Hull Wakefield game in terrible conditions. And whereas Hull and Wakefield, it was a slogfest. Sheffield and Toulouse came out and played. The pitch was awful, the weather was awful, but there's something instinctive about the way they want to move the ball, and that 2 home matches so far, they've racked up almost 100 points. I think they're going to be a real great addition to the Championship, but it's the teams towards the bottom that seem to have got stronger. It's belying the myth at the moment that it's about the spend that you get. Because Oldham wouldn't have many star names that you would talk about, but they're a very difficult team to beat. The same with Swinton, the same with Rochdale, and the worry for me now is what we have to talk about Bradford. They're the elephant in the Championship. Is it even possible for them to get a 12-point deduction back because the other teams have improved so much?
Well, no, they won't. And to be honest with you, I think the way that everybody's talked about Bradford in pre-season, I don't think the worthy of speaking anymore, Phil. So it's all about
I'm just saying
them trying to win games. But
the difficulty for them is the improvement of all these other teams.
Absolutely, but the thing about the Championship, and I've watched a couple of games so far this year, is that if you don't bring your A game in the Championship week in and week out, it's this consistency, then you are going to get turned over. And if you look at Dewsbury, for instance, they played Swinton. They played Rochdale, and now they've gone to Toulouse. And they were. People were saying, well, they may be in the bottom 3.
That would have been Glenn Morrison's 3 bankers.
Correct.
Yeah, and they've scored 8 points.
Can I make a prediction, which is that Bradford will be in the Championship next season?
Because of the league restructure.
And that is not because they're going to make up 12 points on the field, but I would not be surprised if we saw an expanded Championship next year to accommodate Bradford and Toronto and whomever. I don't have a whisper in my ear about that. It's just that if we are looking restructures and changes, I think that there will be given room for growth at the top table.
What you mentioned rules, and one thing I would say is that the rugby that we've seen, which very embryonic this season, in the wrong conditions, because the weather will get better, the pitches will get faster. I think that's already starting to make a difference, particularly the 7-tackle rule on kicking. I think we're now seeing more players that are prepared to handle the ball on the last tackle and be caught in possession but near the opposition line. I think we're judicious kickers now who can keep the ball in play or in a narrowing goal or worth their weight in goal, but that's a skill. The same with the 40-20, that if you can pull one of those off to get the ball with a tap, to speed it up at your tempo. I think that actually might improve the game.
I think we like the rule changes, don't we?
I think so.
Well, that's what we're in the entertainment business, aren't we? Yeah. That's what we want, you know. It's, and they said, well, to be honest with you, I didn't know that rule had came in, and it was Wakefield and Hull, and then I thought, well, just give a penalty. He said, oh no, it's a 7 tackle rule now. They're allowed to, you know, the great 40-20. We don't see enough of that. You know, it's an attacking ploy.
It is more
great to see.
There's more of a premium on it in our game actually than there is in the NRL because of course there you've got 10-metre in goals in a lot of them, and I thought it actually worked against the NRL teams in the World Club Series because it took them a while to kind of recalibrate. Wow, I've only got a 5-yard in goal here, and I thought, you know, it will put an onus and a premium on some of the star players in Super League like Mark Sneed, you know, one of the premium.
That's all he's got. By
Don't poke the bear with a stick.
That's all he's got.
Don't poke the bear with a stick.
Don't be getting me wound up here. That's all he's got. I'll tell you.
One rule that hasn't received universal acclaim, and I think it was highlighted by Josh Jones and Danny Brough in the Huddersfield Salford flinging the ball into the player.
It's cheating. It's cheating. Scrap it.
Playing the rules. It's not cheating. Josh Jones has nothing wrong.
That rule.
No, it's not even that.
It needs to go.
He's playing the rule, isn't he?
That rule needs to go. Whoever's invented that rule is
in the World Club
ridiculous.
Series.
Referee James Charles got that one wrong. Because it was a deliberate forward pass. It should have been a penalty. It should have been a penalty to Huddersfield anyway. Failing that, a forward pass. But it just needs taking out of the game.
It's only something we get at the beginning of every season. And Ian Watson even came out and said, whilst he was grateful for the penalty, it was unseemly.
But even though it's going down the other leagues, because I was at Batley Featherstone and they're doing it as well, so it's cheating. And whoever brought this,
you can't blame the players, Gary. The players
well, exactly, but it needs
just get rid of the rules.
It'll go. It will go.
And I think at the very top level that we saw this weekend at the World Club Series, there were numerous opportunities and nobody took them.
It will go.
It's a fad.
It will go because it has to.
It's got to. Simple as that.
Referees, very quick word on them. They get too much airtime. Very briefly, but do we have enough is my question.
Well, Shane Flanagan obviously doesn't think so because, again, to go back to the weekend's action, in fairness to him, he says, listen, if there had been 5 referees, we wouldn't have won. That's good. But I did think Robert Hicks lost control a little bit of that game. I thought Bentham had a great game in the Warrington match, although the players made it easy for him by playing it in a terrific spirit, as feisty as it was. But no, we just can't do what the NRL does because we don't have the resources.
If we're talking about who's on form, which we are about teams, I'd say Jack Smith has started the season really well.
He had a good game. He's had a good game, and
he's got that authority about him.
He does. He carries a gun down his sock as well.
Absolutely. Don't argue with a Marine.
No, so
as Leeds have.
But 2 games a weekend. That's my point. Rather than picking up on individuals.
But nobody's publicising it. But they are losing top-class referees still in the RFL. So they're having to over-promote. So we are, kind of living on a bit of a wing and a prayer in terms of how good these guys can get. And it is early in the season, so we've a long way to go. Fingers crossed, but it is an area that the game needs to address.
We're going to talk about the Championship 1 division when we talk about Toronto, but a brief word on the Cup and the teams that Toronto are going to be facing. Again, very, very early stages, but nice to see clubs like York, who people were very worried about coming into the season, out there competing. Good win for Newcastle at the weekend. There's plenty to look at in that division as well.
Hopefully, yeah. I still think you've got 2 divisions within a division there, and the 3 Cumbrian clubs are going to be the ones that are going to fight in Toronto. I think I have worries about Hunslet. They seem to be just slipping into some kind of an oblivion at the moment.
That would be tragic because, and especially as you would back that up, Gary. The fact that in Hunslet we are struggling to get a competitive, even League One side, really is a worry for me.
But I think York's a good story.
Barrow won't be far off in that competition. I say they've recruited very well, got a good coach in Paul Crary from there, so they're pretty optimistic. Keighley, they're pretty optimistic with the IPro Cup that's gone on this weekend, so that should be a great contest between them two.
We're already now discussing the 2 different divisions within the divisions, aren't we? Because then when we get down to Hemel, Gloucester, South Wales, North Wales,
I'm just not sure that they have improved in the years that they've been in League One, and I'm not sure that's their fault either. I think they were sold something that it hasn't turned out to be.
I'm looking forward to seeing Gloucester, and Lionel, you've not invited me down yet, so I'm waiting still for your invitation to do a bit of hospitality down at Gloucester. I'm looking forward to that game and that afternoon.
On the way, do keep watching, or to pinch Gary's technique, keep watching, especially you coaches. We're going to be talking about the Toronto Wolfpack and running the rule over the NRL as well. Welcome back to the Arc for part 3 of the first Rugby League back chat of 2017. Already on the programme, these three have told you who's going to win Super League, the World Cup, and they've even told you who'll wear the 6 and 7 jerseys for England while they do it. Let's turn our attention to a club who do have a bit of the unknown about them, the Toronto Wolfpack. What have you made of what you've seen and indeed heard so far, Phil?
I think it's absolutely vital that the sport expands into new markets, whether that be the game over here or the NRL, and I think both administrations are looking at how they do that, and this is a toe in the water. You can't have failed to be impressed by anything they've done in the lead up to actually taking the field in anger. I think their PR has been brilliant. I think the way they've handled the recruitment has been excellent. The squad that they put together is minimum mid-championship quality, possibly even higher than that. They've got an owner who seems to appreciate and understand the investment that's got to be made. It's not an instant fix. We've asked them to start at the bottom. I don't agree with that personally. I think we should have started much higher up. But the fact is that we've got a new market that the sport can develop. And we've got an owner there and a chief executive who is definitely talking the talk. Their recruitment is backing them up. I suspect that they will walk through League One. It may well be that they do some damage in that division that will leave a trail behind it in the teams that we've been talking about, the Oxfords, the Gloucestershires, the Hemels, they're not ready to play Toronto as they're set up. Their recruitment has been so good that they're already looking beyond where they are. But a breath of fresh air into the sport, absolutely. The right people at the helm, yes. Quality recruitment, fine. 6,000 intentions of season ticket holders over in the Lamport Stadium, fantastic. We now need to see it in action.
Gary?
Well, there's going to be plenty of damage, that's for sure, on the field, because when you look at the quality of players they have signed, you know, Super League players, NRL players, quality championship players as well, so yeah, they're going to be embarrassing at time, you know, with the results, what they're going to put on the opposition. But hey, listen, they have been allowed, there's no salary cap, they've been allowed to sign who they want. Players are looking to be delighted to be part of this new setup, and as I say, great coaching staff, as we know, Brian Noble as a football director, Paul Rowley, he'll play the right way, they'll play a very expansive game. So everything off the field has been outstanding, but on the field at times, it won't be embarrassing for Toronto, but it will be for the opposition, because quite simply, they're going to be far too good for that division.
I'd endorse everything that Phil said in terms of the positives. It's absolutely what the game needs, and it not only does it need this, it needs more of this. I was hearing whispers at the weekend of having a team from, say, Perth in Super League. Well, forget that. But
nobody wants to go to Scotland at this time.
Nobody wants to go to Perth at this time of year. North America is the next stop for me. But first of all, we've got to make this stick. Yeah. I think you're absolutely right about the fact that some damage can and will be done. But we saw that last week with what last year with what Toulouse did to some of these teams. I'm not so worried about that. I think the clubs will embrace the fact that they're going to be flown over, you know, all free gratis to have a great weekend in Toronto. They'll enjoy the experience. I think the thing that slightly troubles me is that this is an English team based in Brighouse purporting to be Toronto Wolfpack. I hope that the city of Toronto embraces them in the fashion that they feel confident it will. Beyond that, it's just going to be a long month or so waiting to get over there. I
think part of the worry is the image that's given back to the people of Toronto, because it's fine that you turn up and you see your team win and win well in your stadium, but when the pictures have been back of a half-empty stadium and Craig Hall's going in for his 17th try that afternoon, they need to see elite sport. I think the Americans work on the basis of the fact that what they're watching is the best they can be watching, and we're not selling them that this year. So I think that is a danger. I also think it's the investment that's quite important, that we've got an owner here who purportedly is a multi-billionaire, he's a gold mine owner, various other mineral options. He seems to have grasped the idea that it's not about what they do this year, and I have reservations about what they're going to do this year, but it's really about, you mentioned a restructure perhaps of the leagues, it's where they're going to be in 2 or 3 years' time. Yeah. It's also about the fact that I'm not too bothered that they're mainly English players, because they can't go and sign Canadians. They're just not there. They follow sports where, you know, Americans will come and play in their ice hockey league. I don't think it's as much a foreign thing to them as it is to us. What I'd like is that obviously Billy Slater's coming to the end of his career. If they could sign somebody like him, if we can reintroduce this idea that marquee players are are out there, and Toronto are the kind of club that can go and get them, then that's where I think they could be really useful for just reinvigorating, let's say, the English competition.
What about signing Billy Slate? What about signing me? I could play in that Toronto side and play against Gloucester and play against Oxford. And don't worry about that. But I don't know what you feel about this as well, fellas. Is obviously Toronto, when they get over there, they've got 6,000 tickets being sold and they're looking for 10,000 people there. Will the fans of Toronto, the home fans, because they are going to see score lines of 60, 70, 80, 90 week in and week out when they are at home, could they get bored of that, or will the Canadians just embrace? You know, they get bored and
they don't run the score up traditionally in North American sport, do they? It's perceived to be poor form.
Yeah. That is the danger, but we have talked about Workington, Whitehaven, Barrow being strong. You know, York, Keighley, hopefully giving them a little bit of something. There is too much quality for this division in that team, but the fact is, within that, I think there'll be some competitiveness. I think that they can put on a show. I think that I remember when Eric Perez came in and he says, Toronto, you know, Canadian fans are not really worried about winning. They want to see good sport. Yeah. Well, I tell you what, if they're seeing 40, 50 points, you know, and they're seeing some cracking rugby, Garry, you know, it's better than seeing an 8-6, you know, slugfest.
What's more exciting, I think, at this stage, before they've even entered League One, is their participation in the Challenge Cup. Because if we assume that they will get past Siddle, and I think Siddle will give them a game, but you're talking about a community club against a championship stream, then they're starting to have the possibility of drawing teams of more of a comparable standard. I'm excited to see how far they get in the Challenge Cup.
Listen, Wolfie for sure here, Toronto, if the Challenge Cup goes kindly, who's to say Toronto couldn't make the quarterfinals or the semi-finals because the squad they have got...
Toulouse have done it in the past.
You know, if the draw is kind to them, who's to say they can't go to the quarterfinals and semi-final because, you know, they have got a cracking squad.
Exciting times, and if you would like to see the Toronto Wolfpack in their first competitive fixture, you can, live and exclusive on Premier Sports. They're at London Scholars on Saturday the 4th of March. It's a 2:30 kickoff. So that's the Wolfpack. Let's finish with the Rat Pack, looking at the NRL. We've seen a couple of the sides in the World Club, as we've mentioned. We know about the recruitment. Most recently, Greenwood going from Saints, another English player heading over there. Early vibes, early thoughts, Danny, about what we're going to see in Australia and New Zealand this year.
I think it was Scoy last year who actually tipped Cronulla to have a great season.
Did you?
And
dine out on that, Garry.
I did as well, because you know we lost the great Roger Miller Award. It would be a great sentiment for that. Oh yeah, hey listen, I'm the best predictor in the Rugby League. Don't worry about that.
I'll make you a prediction.
Yeah.
Cronulla could well be the Leicester City of the NRL this year.
Oh, that's a bit harsh, Danny. That's a bit harsh.
It is a little bit harsh, but they won't be repeating, that's for sure. I think the one thing that you can always say, or certainly in recent years say, is that North Queensland Cowboys, Melbourne Storm are going to be two of your top four, pretty much assured. Broncos won't be a long way off it. I would love to see Canberra come on strong again with the English influence.
Big season for South Sydney, Michael Maguire, big season for Maguire.
South Sydney Farrah could be a really important
South Sydney really need, they've a lot to turn around from last year. We need a renaissance of Sam Burgess, because I'd love to see a big World Cup year out of Big Sam. But beyond that, you never really know who's going to... There will be bolters in the NRL.
The most exciting team will be Penrith, because they have got a fantastic back division. The most exciting young players, you know, the Cartwrights, the Mansours.
Have they got creative halfbacks?
Oh yeah, Bryce Cartwright and
young
clearers.
I hope not.
But they've signed James Tarmo, and again, don't read anything into the nines, but he looked really up for this, and that could just be the...
What about my old
Bolter team?
West Tigers, how are they looking? Do we know? Tedesco's a great fullback.
Aaron Woods.
But anybody can beat anybody, can't they, in that competition? You know?
I think West will be looking for a top 8 spot, probably at best, if we're being fair. But again, you can, you know, it is time for the New Zealand Warriors to finally make good on their promise.
Well, Stephen Kearney again could be a massive signing.
We get it year after year after year, but I think that they really need, you know, they've got arguably the best halfbacks in the competition, as and when they get them on the field healthy and with their heads on straight. But But it's all to play for.
Well, Newcastle Knights have been the most disappointing team for the last 2 years. Their trial game last week, they won 44-0 against the Canberra team, who were saying, they could do something this year.
Joe Wardler's gone there.
Could
Again,
be
more interest from...
I just think, again, everybody starts level. We start our season and we know that there are salary cap variations. So you can start picking a league table here on just spend. You can't. I think we've seen some great youngsters come through. North Queensland, you mentioned, Ben Hampton's a magnificent signing.
It'll be interesting to see if the British lads like Jordan Turner and Dan Sargentson get some serious game time. I mean, we were saying Joe Burgess looks like he's come back a better player.
So's Cooper.
Mike Cooper particularly has. So in terms of developing our domestic game, it's not a bad place to send them, is it?
What about the Roosters? They won the Nines.
Well, Latrell Mitchell's arguably the best young talent in the game.
Yeah. But again,
Connor Watson was the player of the tournament in the Nines. He looks like he could be really something.
But might not even get a start in the NRL. Once the big boys come out to play, I don't think you can read too much into the Nines, and I think that is a concept, by the way, that is in a little bit of limbo. But let's put it like this: that first weekend of NRL games, I will be glued to the telly.
Absolutely.
It looks very, very exciting. I know that some of you aren't keen on predictions. But it would be remiss of us in the first programme of the year not to put some on the table. So if I had to press you for a winner of Super League, Championship and the NRL, I don't need to know any halfbacks in the teams that win the competitions. Who would you be going for, Phil?
I think Warrington's time will come this year. I think the forward recruitment they've made to give them extra intensity off the bench is the missing ingredient. So if they can keep everybody fit, I'd go for them for Super League. I think Hull KR will finish top of the Championship. I just don't know if they'll get through the £1 million game. And of course, if there's a restructure, we don't know if it'll matter whether they'll get through the £1 million game. It could be straight promotion, we don't know. NRL, I've just got a sneaky feeling for Penrith. I think all round I've got a squad that if they are allowed to play the expansive rugby that they can, you're not going to be able to touch their backs.
Garry?
Wigan, simple for mine. Championship, Ulkis and Rovers because of the quality of what they've got. And I've got to agree with Phil Caplan. I don't often do that, Rich. I don't often do that. I'm going for Penrith in the NRL.
Tell us why Wigan's so categorically, Garry.
Because they're just so hungry. And one thing for sure, what Sean doesn't do, he doesn't allow consistency and to rest on what they've done. He's so ambitious, it's untrue. He makes sure his players keep focused, he makes sure they keep very enthusiastic, because if you don't get to the grand final, and then secondly, if you don't win the grand final, you can't be world champions, can you? So that's a motivation for Sean. He keeps it all there with his players, and they find that way to win, don't they? It's not just the will to win, they find a way to win. As we know last year, at times the style of playing, plus as well the injuries what they had, they find a way to win. For mine, it's Wigan all the way.
Danny?
Well, I'm going to be, because a bit of Dreamboat Schofield's rubbed off on me the last hour. I'm going to go out there, I'm going to have a little flight of my own fancy, and I'm going to depart from Wigan and Warrington, even though they are the smart bets. And if I was having a punt, I'd have a punt on Castleford, because I'd love to see that a new script written there. I'm going to tip Toulouse to come over the top of Hull KR, again, just to be contrary. That's another bit of you that's rubbing off on me, Scoey boy.
You've been on too much wine, Dan.
And then I'm going to go for a bit of a fairy tale ending for the NRL careers, which I think it will be after the World Cup, for Cameron Smith, possibly Cooper Cronk, Billy Slater, and I think that this could be the return of Melbourne's year, Melbourne Storm.
And you mentioned fairy tales. Just finally, if you could have one thing happen this year for the sport, be it the restructuring, be it a bit of stability, and England winning the World Cup, Castleford winning the grand final, I don't know what it may be, what would you pick?
Just that we have expansive rugby this year, that the top of the table is entertainment, no matter who the teams are, that we move away from the wrestle, we move away from forward domination. I wouldn't even mind if we lowered our interchanges to match the NRL, so that players start to get a bit more tired while they're out there and more space becomes available. I just want it to be entertaining this year. I think the last 2 or 3 years we've lost out on that a little bit. And I think it might be.
Coaches to listen to halfbacks, let them play how they want to play, and simple, England to win the World Cup.
Yeah, and I would say I'd like to see fuller terraces. I'd like to see the football that Phil's talked about being played. I want to see the entertaining product that we know Rugby League is, and I would like to see the fans come out and give it more.
Danny says he's going to be watching all of round 1 in the Telstra Premiership. You can too on Thursday the 2nd of March. The Sharks versus the Broncos. That's a 9:05 start. The Bulldogs host the Storm at 7 on Friday morning. Also, the Rabbitohs against the Tigers. That's a 9:05 kickoff on the same day. 3 games on the Saturday. The Dragons versus the Panthers. Early start, 5:30. Cowboys versus Raiders. That's at 8 o'clock. And at 10, it's the Titans versus the Roosters. And that round 1 rounds off on Sunday, the 5th of March. The Warriors versus the Knights. 3 o'clock in the morning, and at 5, the Sea Eagles versus the Eels. You can check all this and more at www.premiersports.tv. Thank you for watching. That's it for the first edition of Rugby League Back Chat of 2017. My name's Richard Stead, but Dave Woods will be back in this chair next month. My thanks to Danny Lockwood, Phil Caplan and Garry Schofield. Make sure you're all watching next time.